Good morning. Glad to be with you. Going to talk to you today about you and your business. We have a lot to cover on today's program. Mark Skousen, a guy I've been familiar with for a long time, knew his uncle Cleon Skousen as well, attended Cleon's seminars on the Constitution, which were highly recommended. And Mark is a brilliant economist in his own right, and delighted to be able to spend some time with you today. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Doing great, and I've loved your work. I've read a couple of your books, and I love your clarity. You're great background with your PhD in economics from George Washington, but you write in such a way that people, if they don't get it, they're refusing to get it. If you understand what I mean.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, I think you should change your program to call it "The Price is Right."
There you go. Yeah, we have been told that before. We're kind of hoping that The Price is Right slaps us with a lawsuit so we can get some extra media attention. And so we keep begging for that with our opening. But, Mark, tell us a little bit about, first of all, one of the hot topics we're hearing so much of, with the highest unemployment we have seen since the Great Depression, still, in terms of real unemployment. They're talking about creating more barrier between jobs and between people and jobs by raising minimum wage. It defies all logic.
Well, in the past, the minimum wage has never really been that far away from the average wage level for unskilled workers, and so that's why a lot of studies show just minimal effect on unemployment. The problem is that when you have a federal minimum wage, there are many parts of the country, particularly in the South, where wages tend to be lower than up in the North. So the unemployment rate is much worse in the South, and of course that affects minorities, so that among male black teenagers, for example, the unemployment rate is over 40% right now. So, in a sense, President Obama, who's the first black president, is advocating a policy that is very hurtful to his own race. Of course, nobody wants to talk about that. It's hard to believe that a black president would be discriminating against his own race. So nobody brings that up. But still, it's a very serious problem with unskilled workers, teenagers who just want to get started. To have them, it's great, of course, if you have a job. But the problem is that there's a real possibility that business is going to look for ways around this by hiring more trained workers who are more productive, and they're going to use machinery and other innovations to avoid workers, and so we deal with a severe employment problem. You're absolutely right. This is the real danger, and even the Congressional Budget Office said that they would that this increase in the federal minimum wage to $10.10 could cost 500,000, maybe up to 1 million jobs. And who wants that in today's work environment?
Yeah.
Jobs are what it's all about.
Mark, by the way, I have about 10 minutes total on the interview, and I have lots of questions. Just want to encourage you to keep that in mind. Absolutely, I think you nailed it. And the reality is that less than 1% of the population is actually making minimum wage. The vast majority make more than that. The question is where that magic number is, and who's the government to arbitrarily decide what that is? I personally think, first of all, I don't believe there should be any minimum wage, period. I know that sounds insane, but if there is going to be one, it should be federally mandated that the states have one, and let the states determine what that should be, because let's face it, the states, as you just pointed out, have a much better idea of what their communities, what their cities need, and they can get created. They could create sub-minimum wages in places like Detroit or Camden or East St. Louis. What do you think about that?
Well, I think that there's actually been a study recently done, because there's several European countries that have no minimum wage, including Switzerland, never has had a minimum wage. And the study shows that the unemployment rate is substantially lower, so that there's much more job opportunities in countries that have no minimum wage. So you could do that in cities as well, have no minimum wage in Detroit. It'd certainly be beneficial, because the key is to get a job, first of all. You want to get a job. You want to get in on the entry level, and then you become more skilled. You get an increase in your wage, and you're on your way. You know, I teach a class. I just finished a class teaching at Chapman University out in California, and I told people, I said, what is the key to a higher minimum, higher wage? And, of course, the answer is work for a company that is more profitable, because profitable companies tend to pay their workers more. And so this was, you know, profits have to come first. We have to encourage successful business. And if you have successful business, they will pay higher wages. So we don't have to resort to these artificial ways to raise wages when there are natural, genuine, permanent ways to raise wages with companies that make it more profitable. So President Obama should recommend a reduction in the corporate income tax as a way to stimulate profits, and workers will get paid more.
Of course, you know, I know you believe this. You're like everyone else to a certain extent, and noticing the real political realities that we live in. But you and I both know corporations don't pay taxes anyway. It's just a fixed cost of doing business that they pass on to consumers. And so anything they can do to lower the corporate tax rates is only going to encourage job creation, true?
Yes, and of course it's indirect, and you have to have patience. You have to have faith in the capitalist system. And unfortunately, President Obama has never shown much faith in the capitalist system, which is essentially critical to our level of prosperity.
But really, all you have to do is have faith that there's, you know, looking at it cynically, like the liberals tend to do. You just have to have faith that someone is money grubbing enough that they will immediately respond with that lower taxes by trying to get more customers by lowering their prices. Because we have a whole history of showing that. When there's been a change in tax policy, there's almost an immediate effect on pricing because people want to exploit that. And all you need is one major player in every area for there to become a dramatic change in what the cost will be. You know, I admit it may not be 48 hours, but it probably wouldn't be 48 days.
You know, I always tell the story of Henry Ford's $5 a day story, where he more than doubled the wages of his workers overnight in 1914. But he was able to do it because he was so dang profitable. His company had record profits, and he said, what are we going to do with this money? Retained earnings? We're going to give it back to our shareholders? No, we're going to give it to our workers so that they can finally afford to buy the product that they're producing, which was the Model T. It was a great story, and even today, everybody talks about the $5 a day story. And why did it happen? Because the company became more profitable and more productive.
Yep, absolutely. That's what works. And meanwhile, unlike artificially high wages, which will be, lead to higher prices, none of this happens in a vacuum, which is, I think, is what the policy wonks on the left think happen. It all happens in a vacuum, and we can raise wages, and it will only have a positive effect. It doesn't. There's fixed costs to every aspect of doing business. One of those is human energy. You raise the cost of human energy, you raise the price of the finished product, and then you can't help but get cynical and realize that minimum wage is linked to union wages, and you begin to wonder if there's a payoff for union wages. It's really quite dark and murky in the end, isn't it, Mark?
A couple weeks ago, President Obama gave his address to the nation's State of the Union address, and in it he talked about several companies, including Costco and a pizza company in Minneapolis that is raising wages. But it's interesting, Costco has $2 billion, so they can afford to raise wages, and they do increase productivity, and the pizza company, the same thing. Persuasion is fine, but when the president mandates that everybody must, and they have to raise wages, it's persuasion versus force, and force never works. It always backfires. It has unintended consequences. We need to persuade companies to do this, and we persuade them by making them more profitable, giving them the incentives, whether it's a tax credit or whatever, to encourage workers to become more productive. And then it's worth paying them more.
Mark, I'm going to have to wrap it up. Freedom Fest freedomfest.com. By the way, my people will be contacting your people about maybe us covering that event media-wise. Is that something you'd be interested in us doing?
It'd be fantastic. You know, Freedom Fest is the world's largest gathering of free thinkers and free minds. We have it in Las Vegas in July 9th through the 12th. We're going to have 3,000 people there. Stossel's going to be there, Steve Forbes, a whole bunch of all the major think tanks. We would love to have you out there. So if people just go to freedomfest.com, they can learn all about it. It's just an incredible experience.
Stossel, by the way, has been on my program before. A phenomenal guest. Had so much fun with him. John Stossel's awesome. One of the true consequential thinking. I call it just plain old consequential thinking. What happens, what result will it have? And there seems to be a real dearth of that today, isn't there?
There really is, and it's just wonderful for all these great thinkers, the best and the brightest minds in the freedom movement, everybody getting together. It's so energizing. I mean, we get incredible response from people who come to the Freedom Fest conference. So it'd be great to have you there, great to have all the other people there. It's just an unforgettable experience. All
right, freedomfest.com. Don't be surprised if in July we'll be covering from Las Vegas. And don't be surprised. Mark, my people will start working with your people about that. See what we can do.
All right, sounds good.
All right, make sure you check out freedomfest.com. Be there in July. Meanwhile, stay tuned for more right after this on The Price of Business.